Hi, friends. It's Randy.
And Jess.
And we're going to cut the bullshit.
And let's get into women's mental health. Welcome to the podcast, Unapologetically All Over the Place with Randy and Jess, where we talk about women's mental health issues and how it's all normal. This time we want to talk about how ADHD and your hormones are frenemies. We'll explore the 4 times in our life where our hormones shift, and how our ADHD changes when those hormones shift, and how to manage our hormones, how to manage the ADHD more so, kind of what the triggers are.
Yeah, and like how that plays a part in maybe your ADHD like manifesting, because since I wasn't diagnosed until later, it was probably because of like the hormone shift too that became like so much more apparent that I did have it.
There's 4 times in our life where, as women, we shift hormones, right? We're talking
4 major times.
Puberty?
Every month.
Every month,
That, well, there's 4 major
right.
cycles.
There's puberty. There's when we become adults. There's when we have children, and then hormones, menopause. Oh my gosh, perimenopause. I'm all over it right now.
Yeah. And I'm headed on that train.
Right, the train.
It's like a runaway train that you can't control.
Yeah, it's doing its thing, man.
Okay, so have you ever had these thoughts?
Your symptoms, oh my God, why is my ADHD so much worse right now? Right before you start your period.
Yeah, do you think things are a little bit fuzzier or like off kilter at specific points in like your hormonal cycle?
Or why do I feel the need to super organize right now? Or why am I out of control with my organization and I keep losing stuff during certain times of your month or certain cycles of your life?
Yeah. Or like, why am I only hyper focused during this time of the month or like during this phase of my life?
Right. That's where I like to start new projects, right? When my hormones go crazy is when I'm like, let's go get a puppy.
Right.
Because that sounds like a good idea.
Yeah. So it's like looking back and thinking like, wow, like these things were kind of like really triggering at these certain cycles or points in my life. Like they were like, there was like a much more higher influx than others.
So women with ADHD, which is attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, we experience symptoms differently depending upon how our hormones are, which I thought was really interesting, right? Both of us being women, obviously, and having ADHD, and both being diagnosed late in life. The average is what?
36 to 38 is the average for late diagnosis. I was diagnosed at 40.
Yeah, I think I was 42.
Or actually 41.
I was 42 when I finally figured it out.
Yeah. And if you guys want a little bit more information about being diagnosed with ADHD, listen into our other podcast. We have one explaining that, because I think a lot of times people don't understand that it can also mean like inattentive or like there's different layers to it. Yeah, it doesn't just mean like bouncing off the walls like 24/7. It can be like, there's varying degrees of it. So listen into that.
And like Randy's talking about is that prior to being diagnosed late in life, most women are diagnosed as a mood disorder or
anxiety.
Yeah, or depression.
Yeah, which was what they did to me. And I was like, why does none of this medication work for me? It was like, it was the wrong medication. That's
right. Why does it only get me so far?
Because a lot of medical physicians don't always look at the correlation between women, hormones, and ADHD always playing a part. Like it can be also told like you just have like PMS or you just have like PMDD, and same thing, like you kind of need to figure out like the whole picture, like what's really going on. Is it just during this, cycle, or is it like all the time?
And they're finally starting to figure out, and they're starting to do more studies that show,
thank God,
right, how hormones play such a huge role in regulating the communication between our brain cells, which obviously, if there's miscommunication or dysregulation, there goes our executive functioning, which is what ADHD is all about, right?
Yeah, like you don't function normally. You don't think normally like other people. It disrupts like the way you process things. And so you're not crazy. And it's because of those hormone fluctuations with estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, that changes that. And also there's things, in our environment and our foods and stuff too that affect that too, not just our own body cycles.
Right. And it kind of feels like a big duh moment. Like, why are we not looking at, why are they not looking at more of how our hormones actually address it?
Right. They regulate our bodies. They regulate our emotions. There's so many things. Why aren't we like learning like the root and like where this is coming from? So let's kind of go back to puberty and like how that looks with ADHD and hormones.
Increased levels of estrogen and progesterone can cause ADHD and medications to be less effective, right? They're saying that like estrogen can enhance amphetamine medication, which is 97% probably of ADHD medication, but progesterone can lessen it, which I was like, oh, that made so much sense when you start looking at, your cycles and how it goes, right?
Yeah, because I do feel that too, like even being perimenopausal and stuff, sometimes during the month, my ADHD medications don't seem to help.
Did I even take it?
Right. I'm like lost and fuzzy and I'm like, why am I like so off track? And it's like because of my hormones fluctuating and stuff, it's less effective.
When our kids are going through puberty, if they're taking ADHD medications, the typical response for boys, and I feel very lucky that my daughter, being a girl, has a female doctor to give medication and brought this to my attention, right? So boys, they just up the dose.
Right.
And they're like, they need more help. We'll just up it.
Yeah.
For girls, they can't just up the dose. It doesn't work anymore. They have to change it up. Which I was like, I didn't know that, even as a therapist. Did you know that?
No, I didn't know that because like our hormones are ever changing. Yeah. And like also when girls hit puberty, they start metabolizing their medications faster in their system. And so therefore they can also become less effective.
Right. And different than boys. So let's go over, I want to go over like an ADHD puberty for girls versus say neurotypical. Neurotypical is somebody who does not have ADHD. It is the proper name for normal. ADHD girls tend to have increased problems academically. The focus, the studying, did you actually even do it? More aggressive behavior. Holy crap. That's what we had some of that just like, brah.
Yeah. I mean, that goes along with being like a teenager too. But yeah, it's like so bad around their hormones when they start their period and stuff like that. Earlier signs of substance related problems, if they're trying to like self-medicate because they feel, out of control with their emotional and physical like body regulations, and higher rates of depression too, which is like what I thought I had most of my life.
Right. And very normal for an ADHD girl going through puberty to feel more depressed than a neurotypical girl.
Yeah, and typical of girls, we internalize versus a boy who's going to like let it out and spew all out. Like that's my son, with ADHD, it's like, like you see it, you physically see him like spewing everywhere. Where it's like me and my daughter, we internalize it and push it down into a deep dark hole, and then it will pop
and
up
then when it blows
at the
up,
worst time.
the whole thing just goes woof.
Yeah. So what are some things that we can like help our kids going through puberty then with ADHD?
One of the big ones we use, and I talk about this, is putting it on a calendar.
Like, understanding the cycle. Yeah, we talked about that.
Understanding it. Yeah, because like, I don't know, last week, all of a sudden, she just was like, and I was like, go check your calendar.
It's time.
And she was like, what? Go check your calendar.
But I feel like that's so good because it empowers them with knowledge, instead of feeling out of control, you're like, okay, this is the reasoning for this. And like, nobody can be like, you're acting crazy or you're acting drama, like nobody's going to gaslight you. Like, this is what's happening. I love focusing on their strengths, like not what's causing challenges and issues right now, but like what's going good for them through that, cycle and period, because they're struggling usually emotionally.
Praising for what they are doing. Hey, thank you for remembering to do that. Even if she did just bite my head off 2 seconds ago. Hey, I appreciate you, doing this. I love that you thought about this. Thank you for trying.
Yeah, and working on time management skills and organizational skills. I mean, I still struggle with that.
Part of it is cutting your kid a break, right? I knew she was struggling and I needed to make sure that she was going to start her period. She's being a little cranky.
Yeah.
That's fine. I wanted to make sure she had a good lunch. And so I made her lunch. I prepped it for the week and I was like, okay, this is your lunch. You're going to have some protein. You're going to have some healthy. I didn't want just Cheetos.
Well, and that's the way I tell her dad too, like, listen, this is going to be a little bit tougher week. Like, be aware, like be a little bit more sensitive and understanding. It's the same thing. Like when the kids start back to school, I'm like, you need to understand this is like, they're both going to have meltdowns when they come home, even even though one's 7 and one's 16, because they've been home all summer and now they're sitting in class 8 hours a day. Like, it's going to be meltdown central for a few weeks. Like, okay, like, don't tell them to suck it up.
Right. And so the other night, she was just having kind of meltdowns. And I was like, hey, I didn't make dinner yet. Why don't we just go pick something up? Mm-hmm. And so what I really wanted was her to be in the car ride with me. I could have ordered something and had
but it was taking that time.
Right. I took the time. We took the puppy. We went on a ride. I had to pick something up. I'm doing air quotes because I just needed more car time with her.
Yeah, just that focus time. And that's so funny. And my daughter sent me a TikTok the other day, and it's like your friend saying like, don't spill the tea, don't tell anybody. And it's like you get in the car with your mom and you're like all and like tell her. It's like the car ride. It's like the cone of like silence. And I'm like, also like, who am I going to tell? But it's like, you know,
just you podcaster people.
Right, just nobody knows.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We got home and she said, we were putting away stuff and she says, hey, thanks Mom for earlier. I feel better. Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh, yeah, okay, cool.
Oh, yeah, like I didn't plan that whole thing.
I'm so glad that one worked.
Right. So moving on then to adulthood, what are some things you're a young adult to like that can help you with your cycle with ADHD and your hormones?
The average menstrual cycle is 28 days.
And that comes back to learning how to track it. And with a calendar, that can help you.
We talked about earlier, and I may have misspoke, but estrogen increases the effectiveness of ADHD medications, right?
Right. And you said before, progesterone decreases the effectiveness.
Right. And so the first 2 weeks of your the first 2 weeks of your cycle, right? This is after, what is it? From the start of your period until you ovulate.
Okay.
Your estrogen levels are high.
So that's your follicular? Is that how you say it? I don't know. You guys tell us how you're supposed to say that.
Right. So it's the follicular phase.
Yeah, I still have no idea. I have no idea what that means. Anyway, so just before you ovulate, from the start of your period until you ovulate, your levels are high for estrogen.
And your progesterone is low.
Right. And so that is decreasing the effectiveness of your ADHD medication.
No. That is increasing. Yeah, increasing. No. It's okay. That's increasing the effectiveness. This is confusing even for us, right?
It's like I need to like draw out a visual and like put it up on the website.
I did that when I was doing we were going through. I don't have one for y'all, but I was drawing something because I was like, okay,
to understand
wait.
it. Yeah.
Estrogen promotes the release of what like our feel goods, right? Like our serotonin and our.
I don't have enough serotonin for this shit sweatshirt I have.
Oh my God. I love my serotonin sweatshirt. The serotonin and the dopamine, right? And we've talked about how us ADHDers like to chase dopamine. Mm-hmm. That's why it's better for us and our medication. It increases the medication. If you're not on medication, you're getting the extra feel goods. And so your ADHD is good.
When I'm on I can notice when my period is, coming because I get like super high, like focused and I'm like, yeah, life is great. And then all of a sudden I'm like crash and burn. But yeah, because then we're moving into the next cycle.
Okay, so let's see if we can butcher this name. Luteal? Is it luteal?
I think it's luteal.
Okay, so the luteal phase, which is where our estrogen gets lower.
Down.
And this is where our PMS symptoms show up because our estrogen is low.
Yeah. And a lot of people get migraines because of that. My daughter does. She's very triggered. And both her and I also get like very nauseous and dizzy. So those are some things that I can realize like, ooh, like she'll be like, I don't feel good. Like I'm feeling dizzy. My head hurts. I'm like, calendar? Yes.
Calendar. Yeah. Well, and that's why we chase chocolate. Chocolate is a dopamine food, right? If you look at like what they call the dopamine diet, that's bananas, cheese.
Oh, yeah, I love cheese.
String cheese and some dark chocolate. Oh, girl, I'm in. Those are some of the dopamine foods.
And so those that are more neurodivergent or have ADHD are more likely to experience PMS symptoms.
Girl, I'm better now that I'm actually not having my period, right? As I'm moving into the next phase of life. But like I always PMS'd so bad. PMDD, premenstrual dysphoria,
that's what I have,
right? Where everybody knew I was going to start my period because I was a hot mess.
Well, and that's another thing we'll talk about too is like when you move on from the adult stage into the, aging, your hormones totally shift out of whack again. Like I feel like I'm on the like I said earlier, runaway train.
Right.
So a lot of times they will kind of pair that with giving you like a low dose of antidepressive medication, like if you're struggling with your PMS symptoms.
Right. About 2 to 5 days before, a lot of people like Prozac. It'll give you that quick up. It'll make you feel better, make you, like we've talked about before, not want to kill your husband.
Yeah, some birth control can help. You need to be careful of that too and like look at all the side effects. But for some people, like that really works. I started getting like lumps in my breast, so I was like, I can't use that. So I had to find, other options. But that's the thing. Everybody's bodies and hormones are different. There's no one size fit all. So sometimes you have to try like different things to find out what works.
And with the birth control, they really want you to go with like the 3 weeks of estrogen with the 1 week of progesterone. I can never say that alone, right? What's the other one? Sometimes they'll increase your ADHD meds right beforehand. You get an extra booster.
And sometimes too, like, women, your like testosterone can be off too. Like a lot of men suffer from like low testosterone. Sometimes we can have too much. Sometimes we can have too little, too. So there needs to be more research on it and more testing, but I'm glad that they're starting to do more and more.
They are. And so if you feel like any of this sounds like you, right? We always say educate yourself, look it up, figure out what the follicular stage is and how to say it and talk to your doctor. Find an OB that understands it. Talk to a psych who understands it. Yeah. I mean, I've always felt that you should have somebody who understands it and doesn't tell you you're crazy.
Right. And, reach out to multiple sources, a therapist, a psychiatrist, a doctor, a friend. Get different varying, viewpoints and then do your own research too and kind of feel out like what is the direction I need to move in. And then as you move from, young adulthood and if you decide to move into becoming a parent, that's a whole other ballpark tall with your hormones shifting.
Right. And we're talking basically just during the pregnancy. We're not talking 5 years after parenting. That's a whole other ball game, right? Yeah. Your hormones, we all know your hormones go out of whack. Your estrogen goes up, mood swings, the progesterone, fatigue, the testosterone, the prolactin,
all that compounded. Yeah.
All of that to grow your favorite little one or favorites. Right.
And then you give birth and then your hormones dip again, which is like why a lot of people can fall into depression too.
And if you're ADHD, you have a higher risk of having postpartum or perinatal mood disorders. Not saying those who aren't ADHD can't get postpartum depression, but you have a higher risk of it because of being ADHD.
Yeah, so it's good to be aware of that could be something that you or your partner need to be on the lookout for, because sometimes you can't recognize those symptoms or you think like I'll be able to pull myself out of it. Or I've had, clients and friends too that have been like, well, this is my third kid, like, and I never had it before. So why it can't be that again? And it's like, it can, you're older now, things have shifted, things have changed, your hormones are different. Like that is a possibility.
Even with bipolar, going just a little sidetracked here, for people who are bipolar who are undiagnosed, there is a 1 in 4 chance that they could have a bipolar disillusional kind of break. So that means it could be your 4th child that all of a sudden
it triggers. Yeah,
you're triggered and you're having a manic episode where you're like, I didn't even know I was bipolar.
Right.
And so it's the hormones and how everything works.
And that's like for anything, like a lot of stressful situations and stuff can trigger other medical issues. My mom, after she had me, her rheumatoid arthritis was triggered from like the stress, and it laid dormant until then. And it's like, then all of a sudden, like your body change, hormones change, everything shift, and it becomes like this active disease, like out of nowhere. So it's not just like mental health too. It can be like so many things as your body changes. You are not in the same body as you were. Like you're not the same person you were. You're not in the same body either. Like we're always growing and evolving and changing.
Also want to note a couple things is that women who have postpartum depression, their spouses, even though they're men, they didn't go through they didn't give birth, there's a 50% chance your spouse, your partner has postpartum depression.
Oh, yeah.
And I used to think it was only women because of our hormones, right? But the depression also can go through the house, and it's a hard thing. I mean, we talk about
a huge shift and a huge change adding in, a child, even if feel like you're a seasoned parent, too.
Yeah, even if you're adding in a second or third, you're like, I've done this.
Right.
You haven't added in that child. Right. We haven't added in that part. And when you're pregnant, and if you're ADHD, they talk about how the first 2 weeks, or the first half, right? What is that? The first 20 weeks, 22 weeks is, you don't make me do math.
Yeah, I was like, don't ask me to math.
I'm all for, let's call it 40. Okay. The first part of your pregnancy is the hardest, not just because of morning sickness, because the hormones are messing with your ADHD. Yeah. Most ADHD women find that their symptoms kind of mellow out, and they enjoy and they do better the last half.
Yeah, definitely I would say that. Like with both of my pregnancies were definitely more stable, like the second half, when I was undiagnosed ADHD. So I thought I was like, wow, like what is happening, with all these hormones and wanting to run away from like every situation.
I think, did I tell you I actually ran away?
Yeah, we talked about it. Yeah.
Yeah, I actually ran away. I packed up my food. I packed up my stuff. I packed up my food. Yeah. Yes, you hear that. Packed up my food.
Everything, the most essential item.
I got my food and I ran my way to my mama's because I was like, I'm out.
Yeah.
out.
I was, we were planning our wedding and I got pregnant. I remember like I went to go pick up my wedding dress and then we got in like a big fight and I'm like literally like telling him like stop on the side of the road and like trying to rip the wedding dress out of the car, telling him the wedding's off, like leave me alone. I did take off to my mom's too. I was like, bye, this is over. And then he was like followed me like 3 hours up to my mom's house. Was like, okay, are you done? And I was like, no, I'm done. But like then I was like, I'm pregnant.
See, I knew I was pregnant, right? And my husband's response was, we just need to get through this pregnancy.
Right.
We just need to get through this pregnancy. And it was like, what are you saying? I'm not being irrational. Totally.
And then we, kind of chill out for a while. Well, I think we're just so exhausted. And then we hit, perimenopause or menopause. Like as you start to age, you said like the average age is like 51.
Well, I want to call bullshit a little bit because I think that's actually menopause, right?
Right.
Like, I feel like once we get to menopause, when I actually get there, I might say it differently, but I think it's the peri all the way up, right? Like,
yeah. I would say like, I think it's happening earlier and earlier. You know how like girls are developing earlier and stuff now because of hormones and like the things we eat and like our environment. I feel like too, like women are perimenopause, early menopause,
that makes
earlier
sense.
and earlier.
I didn't think about that. Why is it okay for our girls to start earlier because of hormones?
Right.
I'm air quoting. But why wouldn't we start earlier?
Yeah, and that makes sense too because I developed early. So I guess like thinking about that, maybe I would have like menopause earlier or because I just started. I remember like, like 2 years ago, like I was just like having like the worst periods, like out of like nowhere. And I went to my OBGYN and I was like, help me. And she was like, I hate to tell you, like, this is part of like, and I was like, why did you just add one more thing? I thought things were supposed to get easier. But yeah, it gets almost like worse before it like tapers off again.
And a lot of doctors will tell you that, it's not menopause until you haven't had your period for a year.
Yeah.
Okay, fine.
I disagree with that, but yeah.
Well, that's menopause when it stops.
Oh, okay, when it stops.
All the fun is the peri.
Yeah, it's pre that.
Right.
Yeah, but they don't talk about that enough. Like I hadn't even heard the term perimenopause until I started researching about thinking I kept looking up like premenopause and then I saw this perimenopause and I was okay, like what's what and like doing the research because it's not like overly like talked about.
Well, and that's why I started doing one of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to put out a workbook for perimenopause.
Yeah.
There's so much crap that happens to you,
right?
Yeah,
so it's good to like notate it, like write it down, like understand like your symptoms more and stuff and like
your feet hurt.
Yeah, know that your cycle is happening and that's why your hormones are shifting. Like that's why an understanding so you do feel more empowered and you do feel more in control because it was like I was feeling so out of control and I was like, what? This isn't normal. My ADHD is managed. So it's like, what's causing this spike like out of nowhere? And then
Well, and I'm wondering, that's about the time that I got the ADHD diagnosis, right?
Yeah.
And so what happens is that it kicks up. Your ADHD gets worse, right? And so you start to notice that more. Well, we started to manage my ADHD, made room for the hormonal stuff to start happening.
Right.
And I had a dude doctor. I'm sure there's dude doctors that are great. This one wasn't. We had a small town of like one doctor, and he was like, there's nothing I can do for you. You're fine. And I was like, but I'm not fine. This isn't fine. You know, and it took me doing a lot of research, which is why I want to write that workbook.
Well, and and I can't wait until we release your workbook and stuff, because I feel it'll help so many people, but there's so much to absorb. And I feel like that is a barrier to care, because Jess and I are used to doing research.
Yes.
Like that's what we've been trained to do, is research. But the average woman is not, and there can be so much overwhelming and convoluted information that's not correct. It's like, how do you know? So it's overwhelming. And then sometimes people are just like, no, I just can't even get through all this information.
And that was when I started having plantar fasciitis, right? Like I was fine, and then all of a sudden I wasn't.
Yeah.
I had a female podiatrist, never said it was anything about hormones. Until I was actually here where we are now, I had a male one go, yeah, you know, that's a sign of perimenopause.
That's so interesting.
And
so many things can be interlinked like that.
Yeah. And he went, did you know that? And I was like, I did not. I'm going to add that to my list. And thank you for telling me that. Because I always say that, dudes don't know, but this dude did. Yeah. Which was cool.
Which, I mean, he probably had some experience with some, a female in his life and, did some research on it and found like there was a correlation.
Yeah. So basically what happens when you go through perimenopause, that happens, they say 50, and we're going to call it early 40s for a lot of people. Some people, it's late 30s.
Don't quote us, but that's what we're going to say. It's our opinion.
Right. It's our opinion. What happens is that the estrogen decreases. All the good stuff that made us happy for the first 2 weeks of our cycle, it's now decreasing.
Yeah, it's like...
Which decreases serotonin and dopamine, right? And we know it's ADHD.
So then everything is crashing and burning.
And ADHD chases dopamine, right? And so that's what we like, is that dopamine.
Yeah.
And so that doesn't work for us anymore, right?
So what are some things that we can do to kind of like counteract it?
The big one people will say is hormone replacement therapy. That doesn't work for a lot of women. Especially like in my case, I have a maternal and paternal grandmother who got breast cancer from hormone replacement therapy.
So that's dangerous for you. So,
right. Yeah. So I can't do any form of hormones.
Well, in a lot of places, it's not super regulated. I would say we live in one of those states where a lot of people, anybody can really inject you with anything.
Oh, yeah. So, they can stick the bioidentical hormone pellets in your ass.
Right.
And then like...
so it's like, be careful with that stuff. Yeah.
And even the bioidentical can cause issues.
Faux, fake, dupe version of dupe. Like a real, I would call it a dupe, manufactured like hormone.
Right. That still can cause problems. Yeah. Right. You can do birth control. I've had clients that I'm like, I think you're perimenopausal. Let's go talk to your doctor.
I can't do birth control either. Like you can't do hormone replacement. I can't, because it's like that hormone shift mess with me too. So it's like, because I'm like very sensitive to that. So it's like, that's the same thing. You got to try.
Yeah.
And see what does and doesn't work.
And what they'll do a lot of times for the birth control idea is they'll do estrogen alone for like 3 to 4 months.
Yeah.
And then they'll do like 10 days of progesterone. Yeah. And then 3 to 4 months. And that's kind of how they'll work that out.
Yeah.
The other route that I went, because, you can take the ashwagandha route and you can do,
I do the ashwagandha.
Is that how you say it?
I don't know. Your guess is as good as mine. We're just giving different variations of how you could possibly
whatever
say
that
it.
root is.
I do like the Epsom salt one too, and like soak in that when I'm like, I need to chill that out.
Oh, I've heard of people putting like yam cream on their hands.
There's a lot of different things too. You need to be careful with some of those creams too, because a lot of them can come from random sources. I've heard people getting like skin burns and stuff. It's like, so, make sure it's coming from a reputable source. But other things that you can use besides creams and potions.
Well, what some people don't realize, and this is what I do, is that you can take an SNRI, right?
Okay.
So SSRIs are your basic antidepressants. An SNRI, a selective norepinephrine reuptake inhibitor.
Okay. Anyway, so SNRI versus an SSRI. So
An SNRI, like Paxil and Effexor, they're the ones that will reduce hot flashes.
okay. So if you're having like a lot of physical symptoms.
Right. They will make it so your moods are a little bit more easier. So like I don't get hot flashes anymore. I'm not getting any of like, the night sweats.
Yeah. Well, because a lot of those physical symptoms can disrupt your sleep, which then disrupts your emotional regulation.
Right. So the other options are that you can take an SNRI. There are a lot of people, like I said, that take the Ashwagandha root and they take some other things.
Yeah. Or they do an SSRI too, like the Prozac or whatever. So it's like kind of figure out like what works for you and get some support behind you as you're going through this because you're not alone in it.
No, and just know that your hormones do affect your symptoms.
Yeah, they affect your life, your relationship, how you think about things, where you're at.
Right. And so if you're trying to work with your doctor, work with your provider to manage your ADHD symptoms and to manage your hormonal symptoms.
Yeah.
I just thought it was interesting that I didn't realize how much our hormones really mess up our ADHD.
Yeah, they affect so many areas of your life that we just downplay a lot. And so it's important to, understand that and take control of it and take a look into it. So we hope that you guys have felt a little bit more empowered with some knowledge today.
And normal.
It's all normal and it's all bullshit.
Right.
We'll talk to you guys next week.
All right. Bye.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Thanks for listening and normalizing mental health with us.
Don't forget to check out our free resources and favorites on our website, unapologeticallyrandyandjess.com.
Like and share this episode and tune in next week.